in a town where whispers roam. A wolf-turned man found a place called home. Sunlight streams through the window panes. A cozy bookstore where magic reigns. Pages turn with every heart's desire, filling the air with tales that inspire. By day it's quiet, the world feels still, but as dusk falls, it's time for the thrill. When the sun goes down and the stars ignite, the wolf among us comes alive at night. Friends gather round with laughter and cheer. In the heart of the stories we hold our dear. Games on the table, love and delight. In this little bookstore, everything's right. He weaves the stories of distant lands, with creatures that play in the palm of his hands. The whispers of legends fill the room. From dragons to dreamers, the shadows bloom. In the laughter we forget our fears, sharing our hopes, the dreams of our years. The flicker of candles, the warm glow inside. In the embrace of tales we let love guide. When the sun goes down and the stars ignite, the wolf among us comes alive at night. Friends gather round with laughter and cheer. In the heart of the stories we hold our dear.
Okay, well. Hey, my mic is unmuted for once. I still need to find background music for Inside the Bookstore. I do have the cat cam on. Of course, the cat that's over there is sleeping just off of the bed. Because cats are cats, and they will sleep whenever and wherever they want to. Now, Twitch is saying that I have an excellent connection right now, so I'm not expecting any real problems. Do something real quick. Oh, the book I was going to advertise seems to be on back order. When did Anne Rice do Ramses the Damned? I don't remember her doing that one, but she snuck a lot of books out there. I cannot find a link to the book. Well, there's one. No, it says it's volume 2. The copy I have has 3 volumes in it. I will post a paperback link to the book I am reading. Okay. Oh, now Twitch says I'm unstable. Because of course Twitch would. Guess I could put. Okay. Now we'll pin that. Why does it say poor connection now? It said excellent connection when I started. And as far as I know, my internet has not changed. Can anyone figure that out? Why does it do that? Because if it's messing up, that means my audio is going to be funky. If my audio is funky, that usually means I have to re-record later. Or I could try to reconnect real quick. I'm going to try to reconnect real quick. Just see if I can reconnect OBS real quick. So I will be back shortly. Where is it? Games. No. This one. I'll be back. Married. Okay. I'm still recording. I'm not streaming. Twitch still seems to think I am. Okay. And now I'll try to reconnect. Yes, I want to start the stream. La 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 la. What the hell? Okay, now Twitch is still saying I'm not streaming. Okay. OBS says I'm on. Okay, now Twitch says I'm unstable again. Why does it keep saying my connection is unstable? It says my bitrate is 2500 kbps. My OBS says I'm doing closer to 2700 kbps. What the hell? Why would it be listed as unstable? I can't see any reason why it would say that my stream is laggy. And that's... I don't know what city Notre Dame plays in. I know the college, clearly. But I don't know what city the college is in. But what is OBS? No, OBS gave me an error when it started. Let me try something real fast again, and I'll be back. I'm going to actually restart OBS completely. Okay, start stream. Starting recording. Okay, it's back to saying it's excellent. Oh, Boston Celtics. Here I was thinking Fighting Irish. Okay, well, if you've been lurking on me, thank you for hanging around. Sorry for there having to be so many ads. But stuff happens. Okay, Twitch still says I have an excellent connection. I'm starting 4 minutes after when I usually start reading. Because, well, frankly, shit happens. I'm used to it happening on Friday, though. Is this Curse of the Mummy kind of thing? Nah, I wouldn't do that. Especially since I don't think this mummy does cursing. Don't know. I am going into this as blind as you are. So chances are, there will be a harsh language. because it was written in the 1820s. And there may be some interesting language because it supposedly takes place in the 2120s. I'm not sure if I'd be around then. I'm not sure I'd want to be around then. But we'll find out how it goes. Okay, I will post a link again. Repin it. Yes, at the end of the stream. If anyone wants to buy a paperback version of the book I'm reading, this is a link for it. I will probably add it to my bookshop list. I really need to go through and find all of the books that I've read in these 4 years and get them all listed on my pages. Because for those of you who don't know, I do have a bookshop.org site that I curate can't say playlists, I curate book lists for. So I feature folklore, herbal remedies, because, you know, my bookstore is... Hey, Deaf and Nerdy!
Welcome to Grey Wolf Rare and Magical Books. How can I help you today?
Thank you for the follow. Okay. Are the ads still going? Oh. My signal's changing. And now it gets announced. Wow. Everything is laggy. But as long as it says I have an excellent connection, I will try to believe it. And we will go here. Welcome to my study. I really should set up reading areas in the bookstore. Okay, ads are over. But welcome in. This charming fellow over here is one of the very many book cover versions they've done for this book. But I am already way behind schedule, which is crazy since it's a Unite. Scully Page is in the chat, which is fun. This book has 32 chapters, but no introduction, so I don't have to worry about that one. And chapters are just numbered, they aren't named. So, feel free to sit back, open my water bottle so I can get hydrated when needed. And you're going to love the full title of this story. If I can get a copy of it. Oh, actually, it's on the screen. The Mummy, a tale of the 22nd century. Chapter 1. In the year 2126, England enjoyed peace and tranquility under an absolute dominion of a female sovereign. Numerous changes had taken place for some centuries in the political state of the country, and several forms of government had been successfully adopted and destroyed, till, as is generally the case after violent revolutions, they all settled down into an absolute monarchy. In the meantime, the religion of the country had been unmutable by its government, and in the end, by adopting Catholicism, it seemed to have arrived at nearly the same result. Despotism in the state, indeed, naturally produces despotism in religion. The implicit faith and passive obedience required in one case being the best of all possible preparatives for the absolute submission of both mind and body necessary in the other. In former times, England had been blessed with a mixed government and a tolerant religion, under which the people had enjoyed as much freedom as they perhaps ever can do, consistently with their prosperity and happiness. It is not the nature of the human mind, however, to be contented. We must always either hope or fear, and things at a distance appear much more beautiful than they do when we approach them. That we always fancy what we have not infinitely superior to anything we have, and neglect enjoyments within our reach to pursue others which, like ignis fatui, elude our grasp at the very moment when we hope we have attained them. Thus it was with the people of England. Not satisfied with being rich or prosperous, they longed for something more. Abundance of wealth caused wild schemes and gigantic speculations, and though many failed, yet as some succeeded, the enormity of sums gained by the projectors incited others to pursue the same career. New countries were discovered and civilized, and the whole earth was brought to the highest pitch of cultivation. Every corner of it was explored, mountains were leveled, mines were excavated, and the globe racked to its center. Nay, the air and sea did not escape, and all nature was compelled to submit to the overwhelming supremacy of man. Still, however, the English people were not contented. Enabled to gratify every wish till satiety succeeded indulgence, they were still unhappy, perhaps precisely because they had no longer any difficulties to encounter. In the meantime, education had become universal, and the technical terms of abstruse sciences familiar to the lowest mechanics, whilst questions of religion and politics and metaphysics, agitated by them daily, supplied them stimulus for which their minds, enervated by over-cultivation, constantly craved. The consequences may be readily conceived. It was impossible for those who studied deeply, who had to labor for their daily bread, and in not having time to make themselves masters of any given subject, they only learned enough of all to render them disputations and discontented. Their heads were filled with words to which they affixed no definite ideas, and the little sense heaven had blessed them with was lost beneath a mass of undigested and misapplied knowledge. Conceit inevitably leads to rebellion. The natural consequence of the mob thinking themselves as wise as their rulers was that they took the first convenient opportunity that offered to jostle the aforesaid rulers from their seats. The aristocracy was established, and afterwards a democracy, but both bared the same fate, for the leaders in each turn found the instruments they had made use of to rise soon became unmanageable. The people had tasted the sweets of power, they had learned their own strength, they were enlightened, and fancying they understood the art of ruling as well as their quondam directors, they saw no reason why, after shaking off the control of one master, they should afterwards submit to the dominion of many. "We are free," they said. We acknowledge no laws but those of nature, and of those we are as competent to judge as our would-be masters, and what they are superior to ourselves. Nature has been as bountiful to us as to them, and we have had the same advantages of education. Why should we then toil to give them ease? We are each capable of governing ourselves. Why then should we pay them to rule us? Why should we be debarred from mental enjoyments and condemned to manual labor? Are not our tastes as refined as theirs, and our minds as highly cultivated? We will assert our independence and throw off the yoke. If any man wish for luxuries, let him labor to procure them for himself. We will be slaves no longer. We will all be masters. Thus they reasoned, and thus they acted. Though government after government having been overturned, complete anarchy prevailed, and the people began to discover, though, alas, too late, that there was little pleasure in being masters when there were no subjects, and that it was impossible to enjoy electoral pleasures, whilst each man was compelled to labor for his daily bread. This, however, was inevitable, for the perfect equality has been declared. Of course, no one would condescend to work for his neighbor, and everything was badly done, as, however skillful any man may be in particular art or profession, it was quite impossible he can excel in all. In the meantime, the people who had, through the scarcely knew why, attached to the idea of equality that the exemption from toil found to their infinite surprise, that their burdens had increased tenfold, whilst their comforts had accountably diminished in the same proportion. The blessings of civilization were indeed fast slipping away from them. Every man became afraid lest his hard-earned means of existence should be torn from his grasp, for, as all laws had been abolished, the strong tyrannized over the weak, and the most enlightened nation of the world was in imminent danger of degenerating into a horde of rapacious barbarians. This state of things could not continue, and the people, finding from experience that perfect equality was not quite the most enviable mode of government, began to suspect that a division of labor and distinction of ranks were absolutely necessary to civilization, and sought out their ancient nobility to endeavor to restore something like order to society. These illustrious personages were soon found. Those who had not immigrated had retired to their seats in the country, where, surrounded by their dependents and a few friends who had remained faithful to them, they enjoyed the atium cum dignate, and consoled themselves for the loss of their former greatness by railing most manfully at those who had deprived them of it. Amongst this number was the lineal descendant of the late royal family, and to him the people now resolved humbly and unconditionally to offer the crown, imagining, with the usual vehemence and inconsistency of popular commotions, that the arbitrary government must be best for them, as being the very reverse of that, the evils of which they had just so forcibly experienced. The prince, however, to whom the deputation from the people made this offer, happened not to be ambitious. Like other Cincinnatus, he placed all his happiness in the cultivation of a small farm, and had sufficient prudence to reject the grandeur which he felt must be purchased by the sacrifice of his peace. The disputes were in the despair at his refusal, and they urged their suits with every argument the distress of their situation could inspire. They painted in glowing colors the honors of the anarchy that prevailed, the misery of the kingdom, and the despair of the people, and at last wound up their arguments by solemn appeal to heaven, that if he persisted in his refusal, the future wretchedness of the people might fall upon his head. The prince, however, continued inexorable, and the deputies were preparing to withdraw, when the prince's daughter, who had been present during the whole interview, rushed forward and prevented their retreat. "Stay! I will be your queen!" she cried energetically. "I will save my country or perish in the attempt!" The princess was a beautiful woman, about 26, and at this moment, her fine eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, her cheeks glowing, and her whole face and figure breathing dignity from the exalted purpose of her soul, she appeared to the deputies almost as a supernatural being. And regarding her offer as a direct inspiration from heaven, they bore her in triumph to the assembled multitude who awaited their return, whilst the people, ever caught by novelty and desirous of any change to free them from the misery they were enduring, hailed her appearance with delight, and unanimously proclaimed her queen. The new sovereign soon found the task she had undertaken a difficult one, but happening luckily to possess common sense and prudence united with a firm and active disposition, she contrived in time to restore order and to confirm her own power, while she contributed to the happiness of her people. The face of the kingdom rapidly changed, security produced improvement, and the self-banished nobles of the former dynasty crowding around the new queen. She chose from amongst them the wisest and most experienced for her counselors, and by their help compounded an excellent code of laws. This book was open to the whole kingdom, and the cases being decided by principle instead of precedent. Litigation was almost unknown, for as the laws were fully and clearly explained, so as to be understood by everybody, few dared to act in open violation of them, punishments being certain to follow detection. And all the agonizing delights of a lawsuit were entirely destroyed, as everybody knew, the moment the facts were stated, how it would inevitably terminate. This renewal of the Golden Age continued several years without interruption, the people being much too delighted with the personal comforts they enjoyed to complain of the errors inseparable from all human institutions, whilst remembrance of what they had suffered during the reign of anarchy made them tremble at the change, and patiently submit to trifling inconveniences to avoid the risk of positive evils. This generation, however, passed away, and with it died not only the recollection of their past misfortunes with the kingdom, but also the spirit of content they had engendered. A new race arose, who, with the ignorance and the presumption of inexperience, found fault with everything they did not understand, and accused the queen and her ministers of dotage, merely because they did not accomplish impossibilities. The government, however, was too firmly established to be easily shaken. The judicious economy of the queen had filled her treasury with riches, her prudent regulations had extended the commerce of her subjects to an almost incredible extent, and her firm and decided disposition made her universally respected both at home and abroad. The malcontents were therefore awed into submission, and obliged, in spite of themselves, to rest satisfied with growling at the government they were not strong enough to overturn. At this time, however, the queen died, and the state of affairs experienced an important change. It has been before said that the religion of the country had altered with its government. Atheism, rational liberty, and fanaticism had followed each other in regular succession, and the people found, by fatal experience, that persecution and bigotry assimilated as naturally as infidelity and superstition. A fixed government, however, seemed to require an established religion, and the multitude, over the extremes, rushed from excess to liberty to intolerance. The Catholic faith was restored, new saints were canonized, and confessors appointed in the families of every person of distinction. These priests, however, were far from having the power they possessed in former times. The eyes of men had been too long opened to be easily closed again. Education still continued among the lower classes, and though at this time this history commences, it is also going out of fashion with persons of rank, and its influence was felt even by those prejudiced against it. During the reign of the late queen, the minds of the public, not having any state affairs to occupy them, had been directed to the improvement of the arts and sciences, and so many new inventions had been struck out, and so many wonderful discoveries had been made, so many ingenious contrivances put into execution. The poor nature seemed degraded from her throne, the usurping man to have stepped up to supply her place. Before the queen died, she chose her niece Claudia to succeed her, and as she enacted that none of her successors should marry, she ordered that all future queens should be chosen by the people from such female members of her family as might be 20 and 25 years of age. at the time of the throne's becoming vacant. Every male throughout the kingdom who had attained the age of 21 was to have a voice in this election, but as it was presumed that it might be inconvenient to convoke these numerous electors into one place, it was agreed that every 10,000 should choose a deputy to proceed to London to represent them, and that a majority of these deputies should elect the Queen. This scheme, however, though feasible in theory, seemed likely to present some difficulties when it was put into practice, but of these the old Queen never troubled herself to think. She had provided against an immediate disturbance by choosing her own successor, and she left posterity to take care of itself. Queen Claudia was one of those fainéant sovereigns of whom it is extremely difficult to write the history, for the simple but unanswerable reason that they never perform any action worthy of being recorded. However, though she did not do much, she seldom did any harm. She thus contrived to escape either violent censure or applause, and in short, to get through the life very decently without making much of a bustle about it. She continued with the same counselors that had been employed by her predecessor, appointing the sons when the fathers died, to save trouble. She left the laws as she found them, for the same reason, and in short, she let the affairs of government go on so quietly and so exactly in the same routine as before, that for 2 or 3 years after her ascension the people were scarcely aware that any change had taken place. The commencement of the year 2126, however, marked by symptoms of turbulence. The malcontents, secretly encouraged by Roderick, King of Ireland, and suffered to gain strength under the easy sway of Claudia, rose to arms in different parts of the kingdom, and marching on London, attempted to seize the person of the Queen. For the moment, the regular forces of the kingdom seemed paralyzed, and the insurgents would have succeeded in their daring attempt, but for the presence of mind and the valor of Edmund Montague, a young officer of ancient family, a captain of the Queen's bodyguard, who had the good fortune to rescue his sovereign. This circumstance was decisive. The rebels, disappointed at their hopes, and imperfectly organized, gave way everywhere before the regular troops, who had now recovered from their stupor, whilst the Queen, whose gratitude for the time succor afforded Edmund Montague was unbound, made him commander of her forces in Germany, and the youthful hero quitted England to take possession of his post. Chapter 2. High and distinguished was the favor shown to Edmund Montague. It was by no means greater than he deserved. His face and figure were such as the imagination delights to picture as a hero of antiquity, and his character accorded well with the majestic graces of his person. Haughty and commanding in his temper, ambition was his god, and love of glory his strongest passion. Yet his very pride had the nobleness in it, and his soldiers loved, though they feared him. Very different was the character of his younger brother, Edric, whose romantic disposition and contemplative turn of mind often excited the ridicule of his friends. As usual, however, in similar cases, the persecutions he endured upon the subject only wedded him more firmly in his own particular opinions, which, indeed, he seemed determined to sustain with the consistency of a martyr, whilst he put on such a countenance of resolution and magnanimity whenever they were assailed by jests and raillery, as might have been imagined suitable for an aspiring Indian at the stake. Unfortunately, however, his friends did not always properly estimate his dignified silence, and their repeated bursts of laughter grated so harshly in the ears of the young Diogens that he became gradually disgusted with mankind. He secluded himself from society, despised the opinion of the world, because he found it was against him, and supposedly himself capable of resisting every species of temptation, simply because, as yet, he had met with nothing adequate to tempt him. Older and more experienced persons have made the same mistake. The education of these two young men had been entrusted to a tutor of characters as essentially different as those from their pupils. Father Morris, who had had the care of the elder, was an intelligent Catholic priest and confessor of the family, whilst Dr. Ettenfin, who took charge of the younger, was a worthy, inoffensive man, whose passion for trying experiments was his leading foible, and whose good nature caused him to be beloved, even by those to whom his follies made him appear ridiculous. Sir Ambrose Montague, the father of Edmund and Edric, was a widower, and these two sons constituted his whole family. The worthy baronet was no bad representative of what old English country gentlemen always have been, and of what it still continued, even in the age of refinement. He was as warm in his feelings, as hasty in his temper, and as violent in his prejudices as many of his predecessors. In fact, the same causes must always lead to the same results, and there is something in the country life that never fails to produce certain peculiar effects upon the mind. Sir Ambrose, however, was far superior to the geniality of his class, and amongst innumerable other good qualities, he was an indulgent master and an affectionate father. His foible, however, for alas, where shall we find character without one, was the desire to show occasionally how implicitly he could be obeyed. In general, he was easy to a fault, and it was only when he roused the opposition that the natural obstinacy of his disposition displayed itself. Edmund was his favorite son. The early military glory of a youthful hero was flattering to his paternal pride, and his eyes would glisten with delight at the bare mention of his darling's name. It was one fine evening in the summer of the year 2126, when Sir Ambrose Montague, such as we have described him, was sitting in the library, anxiously expecting intelligence from the army. To divert his impatience, he had ordered the attendance of his steward, Mr. Davis, and endeavored to amuse himself by hearing a report of the affairs of his farm. Whilst Abelard, the old butler, who had been in baronet's service for more than 40 years, stood behind his master's chair, holding a small tray, on which was placed an elegant apparatus for smoking, and a magnificent service of malleable glass, made to fold up to a pocket size when not in use, containing the baronet's evening refreshments. Sir Ambrose was above 70. His long white hair hung in waving curls upon his shoulders, as he now sat in his comfortable elastic armchair, leaning one elbow on the table before him. His features had been very handsome, and his complexion still retained the look of health and cleanliness, which, in a green old age, is sure indication of a well-spent life. His countenance, though intelligent, was unmarked by the traces of stormy passions. The cares and troubles of life seemed to have gently passed him over, and contented soothed the wrinkles what age might have made upon his brow, whilst the tall, thin figure of Mr. Davis, as he stood reverently bending forward, his hat in his hand, and his whole demeanor expressing a singular mixture of preciseness and habitual respect, contrasted strongly with the dignified appearance of his master. The windows of the library opened to the ground, and looked out upon a fine terrace, shaded by a veranda, supported by trellis work, round which twined roses mingled with vines. Below stretched a smiling valley, beautifully wooded and watered by a majestic river winding slowly along, now lost amidst the spreading foliage of the trees that hung over its banks, and then shining forth again in the sun like a lake of liquid silver. Beyond, rose hills majestically towering to the skies, their clear outline now distinctly marked by the setting sun as it slowly sank behind them, shedding its glowing tints of purple and gold upon their healthy sides, whilst some of its brilliant rays even penetrated through the leafy side of the veranda and danced like summer lightning upon the surface of a mirror of polished steel which hung directly in the face of Sir Ambrose. "What a lovely evening!" exclaimed the worthy baronet, gazing with his delighted eye upon the rich landscape before him. "Often I have seen it looked upon and seen. Methinks every time I see it I discover some new beauty. How finely the golden tint of the sun throws upon the tops of those trees is relieved in the deep masses of shadows below." "It is a fine evening," said Davis, bowing low. "If your honor pleases, I think we had better get the patient's stream-mowing apparatus in motion tomorrow. If the sun is to be as hot tomorrow as it has been today, I am sure the hay will make without using the burning glass at all." "Do as you like, Davis," returned his master, taking his pipe. "You know I leave these matters entirely to you." And does not your honor think I had better give up a barley little rain? It will be all burnt up if the weather continues, and if your honor approves, it may be done immediately. For I saw a nice little black, heavy-looking cloud sailing just by now, and I can get the electrical machine out in 5 minutes to draw it down, if your honor thinks it fit.
I've already told you I leave these things entirely to you, Davis, returned the baronet, puffing out volumes of smoke from his hookah. Inundate the fields if you will. You have my full permission to do whatever you please with them, so that you don't trouble me any more about the matter.
But I would not wish to act without your honor's full conviction, resumed the persevering steward. Your honor must be aware of the aridity of the soil, and it is impossible that exists a proper development of insipid heads unless they are surprised with the adequate quantity of moisture.
You are very unreasonable, Davis, said Sir Ambrose. Most of your fraternity would be satisfied by being permitted to have their own way, but you—
Excuse me for interrupting, your honor, cried Davis, bowing profoundly, but I cannot bear to be thought that I was capable of persuading your honor to take any steps your honor might not thoroughly approve. Now, as to the germination and ripening—
My good fellow!
exclaimed Sir Ambrose, smiling at the energy with which Davis spoke, his thin figure waving backwards and forwards in the sunshine, and his earnest wish to convince his master almost depriving his voice of the solemnness and sincerest tone.
As I said before, I give you full and free liberty to burn, dry, or drown my fields as you may think fit, empowering you to take steps you judge proper, either to germinate or ripen corn upon any part of my estate whatsoever, only permitting that in the future you never trouble me upon this subject. And so good night.
Thus being spoken in a tone of voice Davis had not declared to disobey, he slowly retired, apparently as much annoyed at having his own way as some people were having it being contradicted. And suddenly a brilliant flash of light gleamed in the baronet's polished mirror.
"Oh, what is that?"
exclaimed Ambrose, starting up and dashing his pipe on the ground. He gazed eagerly upon the mirror for a few seconds in breathless anxiety, bending forwards in listening attitude, not daring to sit, as though he feared the slightest movement might destroy the pleasing illusion. The flash was repeated again and again in rapid succession, whilst a peal of silver bells began to ring their rounds in liquid melody.
"Thank God! Thank God!"
exclaimed the aged baronet, sinking upon his knees and clasping his hands together, whilst the big tears rolled rapidly down his face.
"My Edward has conquered! My Edmund is safe!"
The faithful servants of Sir Ambrose followed the example of their master, and for some minutes the whole party appeared lost in silent thanksgiving, the silver bells still continuing their harmonious sweetness, though with softer and softer strains, till at last it gradually died away upon the ear. Sir Ambrose started from his knees, and the melody ceased, and desiring Abelard to summon Edric and Father Morris, he rushed upon the terrace, followed by Davis, to examine a telegraph placed upon the little distance, so as to be seen from the end of it. The light and music just mentioned being the signal always given when some important information was about to be transmitted. The sun had now sunk behind the hills, and the shades of evening were rapidly closing in on the baronet, who streaming eyes watched the various movements of the machine.
1, 2, 6, he said. "Yes, that signifies he has won the battle and is safe. My heart told me so when I saw the signal flash. My darling Edmund. 2, 4, and 8. He has subdued the Germans and taken the whole of the fine province of France. 6, 6, and 4. Alas, my failing eyes are too weak to see distinctly. Davis, I implore you, look. The signal is changing before we have discovered its meaning. For mercy's sake, look before it's too late. Alas, alas, I've forgotten your eyes are as feeble as my own. Oh, Davis, where is Edric? Why is he not here to assist his poor old father at a moment such as this?"
In the meantime, Edric was, as usual, engaged in the most abstract speculations with Dr. Etterfin, which now formed the only pleasure of his existence, and which he pursued with an eagerness that made all the ordinary affairs of life tasteless and stupid. The imagination had become heated by long dwelling upon the same theme, and a strange, wild, and indefinable craving to hold converse with the disembodied spirit haunted him incessantly. He had long buried his feverish anxiety in his own breast, and tried in vain to subdue it, but it seemed to hang upon his steps, to present itself whenever he went, and in short, to pursue him with the malignancy of a demon. "What's the matter with you, Edric?" said Dr. Edworthen to his pupil, the day he had already mentioned. "You are so changed. Scarcely I know you, and your eyes have a wild expression, absolutely terrific." "I am indeed half mad," returned Eric with a mouth on his mouth, "and yet, perhaps you will laugh when I tell you the reason of my uneasiness. I am tormented by an earnest desire to communicate with one of the grave. I am tormented by an earnest desire to communicate with one who has been an inhabitant of the tomb. I would fain know the secrets of the grave, and ascertain whether the spirit be chained after death to its earthly covering of clay, condemned till the day of final resurrection, to hover about the rotting mass of corruption that once contained it, or whether at last agonizes death free it from its mortal ties, and leave it floating, free as air, in the brightness regions of ethereal space." "You know my opinion," said the doctor. "I do," replied the pupil, "but forgive me if I add, I do not feel satisfied with it. In fact, mine is not a character to be satisfied with building upon faith of any other man. I would see and judge for myself." "I do not blame you," resumed the doctor. "A reasonable being should believe nothing he cannot prove. However, to remove your doubts, I am convinced we only have occasion to step into the adjoining churchyard and try my galvanic battery on 50 surgeon power, which you must allow is surely enough to reanimate the dead, upon a body, and then—" "Hold, hold!" cried Eric, shuddering. "My blood freezes in my veins at the thought of the churchyard. Your words recall a horrible dream that I had last night, which even now dwells on my mind and resists all efforts I can make to shake it off." "Tell me then," resumed the doctor, "for the imagination is possessed of horrible fantasies. It is often relieved by speaking of them to another person." "I thought," said Eric, "that I was wandering in a thick, gloomy wood through which I had the utmost difficulty to make my way. Black trees, frowning in awful majesty above my head, twined together in masses, so as almost to obstruct my path. Suddenly a fearful light flashed upon me, and I saw at my feet a horrid charnel horse, where the dying mingled terrifically with the dead. The miserable living wretches turned and writhed in pain, striving in vain to escape from the mass of putrescence heaped upon them. I saw their eyeballs roll in agony. I watched the distortion of their features, and, making violent effort to relieve one who had almost crawled to my feet, I shrank back in horror as I found the arm I grasped give way to my touch, and the disgusting mass of corruption crumbled beneath my fingers. Shuddering, I awoke, a cold sweat hanging upon my brow, and every nerve thrilling with convulsive agony." "Mere visionary terrors," said the doctor. "You have suffered your imagination to dwell upon one subject till it has become morbid. However, though I do not see any reason why your dream should make you decline my offer, I will not urge it if it gives you pain." "Is it not strange," continued Edric, apparently pursuing the current of his own thoughts, "that the mind should crave so earnestly that the body shudders at, and yet how can a mass of mere matter, from which we see sink into corruption the moment the spirit is withdrawn from it, shudder? How can it even feel? I can scarcely analyze my own sensations, but it appears to me that two separate and distinct spirits animate the mass of clay that composes the human face. The one, merely a vital spark which gives it life and motion, and which we share in common with brutes, and even vegetables, and other divine ethereal spirits, which we may properly term the soul, which is the direct illumination from God himself, only bestowed upon man." "You know my sentiments upon the subject," replied the doctor. "Therefore I need not repeat them." "I know," resumed Eric. "You think the organs of thought, reflection, imagination, reason, and in short all the mysterious faculty in which we call the mind, material, and as long as the body remains uncorrupted, they may be restored, provided circulation and can be renewed. For that, you think the only principle to set an animal machine in motion.
Can't anything be more clear, said the doctor. We all know that circulation and the action of the lungs are inseparably connected, and that if the latter is arrested, death must ensue. How frequently the apparently dead bodies recovered in friction, which possess circulation, and inflation of the lungs with air, which restores their action. If your idea be correct, that the soul leaves the body the instant that we call death takes place, how do you account for the instances of resuscitation? Think that the soul can be recalled to the body after it has once quitted it? Or that it hovers in the air, attached to it by invisible ligatures, ready to be drawn back to its former situation when the body shall resume its vital functions? You cannot surely suppose it remains in a dormant state and is reawakened with the body, for this would be inconsistent with the very idea of an incorporeal spirit.
Certainly, resumed Eric, the spirit must be capable of existing perfectly distinct from the body, though how, I only candidly my imperfect reason cannot enable me to comprehend.
I wish you would overcome your childish reluctance at trying to experiment upon a corpse, and that must be your doubt's rest, for it could not succeed in reanimating a dead body that has been long entombed, so that it might enjoy the reasonable facilities, or, as you call it, its soul in perfect perfection. My opinion would be completely established.
But where shall we find a perfect body, which has been dead a sufficient time to prevent the possibility of its being only in a trance? For even if I could only conquer the repugnance, I feel that the thought of touching a mass of cold mortality that I presented in my dream last night, according to your own theory, the organs must be perfect, or the experiment will not be complete.
What do you think about trying to operate on a dumped mummy? You know, a chamber which has been recently discovered in the Great Pyramid, which is supposed to have a real tomb of Cheops, and where, it is said, the mummies of that great king and the principal personages of his household have been found in a state of wonderful preservation.
But mummies are so swathed up.
Not those of kings and princes. You know, all travelers, both ancient and modern, who we have seen them, agree but they are wrapped merely in the folds of red and white linen, every finger and every toe distinct. Thus, if we can succeed in resuscitating Cheops, we need not even touch the body, as the clothing it is wrapped in will not at all encumber its movements.
It is feasible, and, as you say rightly, if we put it into execution, it will be the matter of the rest forever. I should also like to visit the pyramids, those celebrated monuments of antiquity, whose origin is lost to the obscurity of the darker ages, and which seem to have been spared by the devastating hand of time, purposely to perplex the learned.
You say right, cried the doctor with enthusiasm, and who can tell but that may be a favored happy mortals, destined to raise the mystic veil that so long uncovered them. We may be destined to explore these wonderful monuments, to revive their mummies, and to force them to reveal the secrets of their prison house. Cheops is said to have built the Great Pyramid, and it is Cheops whom we shall endeavor to reanimate. What then can be more palpable than to have it should be that he who destined to link the revival in the mystery?
Every word you utter, Doctor, increases my ardent desire to put our scheme into immediate execution. But how can we accomplish it? How can we obtain my father's consent? You know it has been long since his intention to marry me to the niece of the Duke of Cornwall, and you know how obstinate both he and the Duke are.
Then if you remain in England, it is your intention to marry Rosabella.
I would perish first.
If that be the case, I confess I do not see the force of your objection.
True, for as long as I refuse to marry her, their anger will be the same, whether I travel or remain in England. In fact, I shall be happier at a distance from here, where I shall be annoyed by having the subject constantly recurred to. Yet it pains me to speak upon it to my father. He has long cherished the idea of my marriage, and dwelt upon it so fondly.
Then you better do what he says. Relinquish all thoughts of scientific discoveries, and settle contentedly into the state of the country, employing your time in regulating your farm, and settling the disputes of your neighbors, and bringing up your children, if you should happen to have any.
How can you torment me so? If you could imagine the struggle in my bosom between inclination and duty, you would pity me.
No, if Edmund be with him, he will never think of me. Oh. Do you think your presence necessary to your father's happiness? No, if Edmund be with him, he will never think of me. And do you not think, nay, are you not certain that the union of Rosabella would make you miserable? It is impossible to doubt it. Her violent temper and the mystery which hangs over the fate of her father, which she cannot bear to have even alluded to, forbid the thought of happiness connected with her. It is strange, so little should be known of her father. I never heard the particulars of his story. No human being knows this story, I believe, but the Duke and my father, however. I remember I've heard it rumored when I was a child that he had committed some fearful crime, that he was either executed or had destroyed himself. Then it is not surprising that it should be a pain to Rosabella to hear him spoken of. But to return to our subject, your answers have removed any doubts that can arise, and after what you have confessed yourself, I cannot imagine what further hesitation you can feel.
At this moment, they were both startled, and the words were arrested in the doctor's lips by a gentle tap at the door. It was old Abelard, the butler. Half ashamed with the unphilosophic terror he had evinced, the doctor felt glad to be able to hide his emotion under the appearance of anger, and demanded peevishly what the matter was.
Have I not told you 100 times, continued he, that I do not like to be interrupted at my studies? And nothing is more disagreeable to me than having one's attention distracted, or has been fixed upon an affair of importance.
Do not attempt to convert the axiom which you propounded, returned Adelaide, speaking in a slow, precise manner, though he weighed every syllable he drawled forth. For deniable facts do not admit the contradiction. However, as the message with which I stand charged at the present moment relates to Master Edric instead of yourself, I humbly opine no blame can attach itself to me on account of the unpermitted interruption of which you allege me to be culpable.
And what do you have to say to me? Demanded Eric.
That the worthy gentleman, your respectable progenitor, requests you instantly to put into exercise your locomotive powers to join him on the terrace, to the end that there your superior visual facilities can afford some engagement to the menial anxiety under which he is presently laboring, by aiding him to develop the intelligence conveyed to him by the telegraphic machine.
What?
Exclaimed Eric eagerly, and then, without waiting a reply, he darted forward, and in a few seconds he was by the side of his father. Allard gazed after him with amazement. There is something very astonishing, he said, addressing Dr. Entford. In the effervescence of animal spirits during youth, a labor under complete atrophy upon the subject, I should think it must arise from the excessive elasticity of the nerves. Ideas strike. But here, having unfortunately to look it up, he too was struck to find Mr. Edmund had vanished with his pupil. The unwilling to taste the eloquence upon the empty air, he also departed, slowly and solemnly, however, according to his custom, to join the party assembled on the terrace. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and take a break here between chapter 2 and 3 to get these ads out of the way so I can continue, hopefully. So I will be back in a few.
Well, I thought I was going to have a cat on the bed, but they decided not to. So, has everything been going right with everyone? Audio's good. Stream not laggy. Always looks laggy on my screen. For those who weren't here when I first said it, the pinned post is actually a link to the book I'm reading. I'll pick a back copy of it if anyone's interested in reading it, because it's been kind of interesting so far. I mean, Victorian England, well, it was written in 1827, so the book's going to be like 200 years old in 2 years. But the story itself is taking place in 2126. It's interesting that she's keeping the old language in it. But with the way everything's another pendular in time, wouldn't surprise me if we went back to it. Oop. No. Cat just tore through the room. Nope. Twitch is saying my connection's unstable again. Twitch. OBS. How we can... Oh. My connection is messing up. I'm watching my captions and they're not even getting my voice anymore. Again, I don't know why my connection keeps saying it's going unstable. See how my computer's doing. Okay, for some reason my CPU is running at 100. What is causing my CPU to be cranking up so high? As my CPU saying it's at 100%. It's saying that most of it is apparently Chrome. It makes me afraid to continue reading if you guys aren't going to be able to hear it right. That's Chrome at 40, and OBS Studio it's 20. But Twitch is still saying my connection is unstable. I don't know why. I've only read 2 chapters when clearly if I don't have technical issues I should have been able to before. Started just turning things off in OBS. That didn't do anything. I really don't know how to fix this. It really bothers me that my computer's doing this. I can't think of any reason why it should be. Why would my CPU be running at 100%? Why is Chrome using so much processor? I'm using 82% of my memory, and I've got 64 gigs on this thing. I don't know. I can't even tell if the signal's going out right. I don't know what's doing.